I throw a million data points, detect the top three interesting points. That's really kind of the job. And predict is if I don't do anything, what's going to happen in the next 24 hours? It'll really spike up or can I wait? Right. So it's basically detection and prediction in this operator's workflow in that concept. That's where ODP really shines.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our number one priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the WBS Podcast. I'm Sam Gupta, your host and principal consultant at digital transformation consulting firm Elevate IQ. The challenge with the technology world is that new technologies keep popping on a daily basis with significant overlap and with no clarity on where and how they will fit in the architecture and what their scope will be as they interact with other systems and cross-functional processes. There is also typically a misunderstanding of a data and analytics system versus a system that is designed to automate and integrate operational workflows and allow teams to collaborate on a single thread of data. One such system is ODP that has been making a lot of buzz with its potential to predict operational failure using Industry 4.0 technologies. But where does it fit in the architecture, and why do companies need another piece of software when they already have so many technologies? In today's episode, our guest, Prateek Joshi, shares his insights into the operational data platforms and their role in the enterprise architecture for manufacturing companies. He also discusses the scope and boundaries of many systems such as ERP, MES, historians, and ODP, and how ODP will interact with each of these systems. Finally, he shares several stories of food and beverage companies where they were able to deploy ODP into their existing architecture to detect and predict anomalies across operational data sources and predict operational bottlenecks and failures before it's too late or expensive. Let me introduce Prateek to you. Prateek Joshi is the founder of Pluto Shift and a published author of 13 books on AI. He has been featured on publications such as Forbes, CNBC, TechCrunch, and Bloomberg. With that, let's get to the conversation. Hey Prateek, welcome to the show.
Hey Sam, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
And I am super pumped to have you as well, because the kind of initiatives that you are doing from the operational data perspective, that is going to be so exciting for our listeners. Just to kick things off, do you want to start with your personal story and your current focus?
Yeah, my entire career has been focused on building AI products. And when I say AI, just kind of expand on that a little bit. AI is the goal, and machine learning is a vehicle to get there, and data is a fuel for that vehicle. So that's how I relate these terms. But I spent my entire career building AI products, and as part of that, I've built products for a long time for the virtual infrastructure, like call it search engines, e-commerce, but through that process realized that AI it's very ubiquitous in the world of virtual infra. Like everyone, we all use our search engines, and it works every single time. But when it comes to the physical world, there's a bit of a gap. It's not as ubiquitous as it could be, and that was the core motivation behind launching Pluto Shift, is to bring AI to the physical world. Because in the physical world, we are gathering a lot of data, enormous quantities of data being collected. And another theme that came together for this is I grew up in a small town called Gulbarga in the southern part of India. Okay. And growing up, water was a bit of a luxury. It's a pretty dry town, and that kind of stuck with me. So when we first launched PlutoShift, the core focus was bringing AI to any physical infrastructure that's managing water. It could be, moving it, treating it, storing it, distributing it. So,
Yeah.
and obviously from there we went from water to beverage to food to data center. So that's a bit of the story of how this came about.
Okay, very interesting. I love the way you are connecting the dots there, especially about your childhood, where you grew up, and finally you are translating that into the business situations. And this platform is going for many different industries, especially the water industry, which is operationally very complex in my experience. So now I am actually going to ask you the next question, which is going to be your perspective on growth, which is the standard question that we ask every single guest that has come on the show. So what does growth mean to you, Prateek?
To me, growth is anything that helps expand the footprint of a business. Right? Usually, the most common form of growth, revenue is a very clear indicator that if the business is making money, growth happens. But for some other companies in different stages, growth means getting more people to use your product, or getting more people to visit your site, getting more people to engage with your customers. So to me, anything that expands the footprint of your business, eventually it leads to revenue. So to me, that's what growth means. And as a leader, especially in our context, we work with a lot of leaders who manage companies that make physical products, right?
Yeah.
So we work with leaders who make beverage, beer, and packaged food, ketchup, cheese, right? So it's these are products that we use and consume every single day. So to me, just kind of understanding as a large company, how do you expand your market share? How do you explore new markets? Because as you already know, different markets, they have their own local rules and kind of way of doing business. So kind of growth is actually, it means different things to different people. But I think just understanding the underlying dynamics of how to drive growth for your business, I think that's what's key here.
Yeah, could not agree more. I definitely agree with that perspective. So now, going back to the conversation that you were mentioning, that, what, you were driven with AI, and then you wanted to bring AI to your physical products. You had done some work in the virtual product space. But when I look at PlutoShift and the work that you guys are doing, obviously you are in the operational data platform space. So when I look at my listeners, they are going to struggle a bit. Okay, so you have the operational data. I sort of get it. This is going to be platform, and then you have sort of AI. So do you want to paint some colors here, how AI is going to be related to operational data? Obviously, for any AI, the foundation is always going to be data. But do you want to sort of draw the scope of where you are going to be relevant in the enterprise architecture, and which system and the data points that you are going to be touching in an organization?
Operational data platform is very relevant to somebody who's running a division or an entire business that makes physical products in some shape or form. You're either making ketchup or beer or cheese,
Okay.
something that at the end of the day something comes out that you can touch and feel. And really, operational data refers to the data you collect from sensors, support tickets, maintenance requests, resource consumption like
Yeah.
electricity, chemicals, inventory. So if you're looking at a large company, a simple example, a specific example is, let's say you're the vice president or maybe the COO of a large company that makes say a beverage product. And when you look at the data that your company is collecting, they're usually spread across different systems. Like, for example, if let's say you have, say, 50 sites spread across the country for different purposes. And within each site, you collect data about pressure and temperature and flow rates that goes to one system. You have data about, okay, how much is each site spending on electricity bills or chemical bills or any kind of buying up resources to make a product. The next would be, how much are you spending on buying raw material to make that product, right? So all of this goes into different systems. And at the end of the day, as a business, you want to make your product while spending as little as possible on the input side. So that ratio is pretty, the better you do, the more efficient you are, which means the revenue and profits will go up. So operational data is all of this that you need to run your business. And today, because of this very siloed nature of this data, a leader, it's usually not straightforward to get a unified view, like a continuous unified view of what's happening, right? You cannot, I want to know what's happening to my 5 plants in Arizona, right? It's not that easy. It's not like you go there, click a button. It's usually somebody has to sit down, get a bunch of spreadsheets together, print out the report. It's not straightforward. And that's where an operational data platform becomes super relevant. So the way you define ODP, operational data platform, is anything that takes data from multiple siloed systems, it centralizes it, right? And it prepares it for further analysis. And that includes usually structuring it in some way to make it available to a variety of people, like process analysts, BI analysts, operators, operations teams. They can then use it because some people want to know how much electricity are we spending. Somebody else may want to know, hey, how many support tickets are we filing? Right. So basically, just kind of centralizing and preparing the data, which can then go into different workflows. The workflow is, just as I mentioned, that's what an ODP does. And as businesses keep expanding, I think this becomes an absolutely critical layer in any operations stack within these large companies.
Okay, so we are going to dig, deeper into that. Obviously, there are a lot of layers to that discussion, and we want to make sure that we are setting the boundaries for the systems. And some of the use cases that you mentioned, for example, let's say if you are talking about number of support tickets, or you are talking about electricity consumption is a very plant level, operational activity. But let's say if you are doing the cost analysis typically is going to be inside the ERP system because that's your financial system, right? And the notion that you mentioned that, we are trying to centralize everything. But when you look at the enterprise architecture, if you talk to 5 different systems, they all are trying to claim that they are trying to centralize something. But the reality of the matter is that, nothing gets centralized, to be honest, okay? So every system has a role to play in the architecture. And I am going to be asking you to define the role of the operational data, platform inside the enterprise architecture. And I am actually going to start defining some of the boundaries of different systems. For example, when you have ERP, obviously ERP has a role to play. When people think of ERP, they have a lot of different perspectives. If you look at the slightly more older systems, if they didn't have very advanced ERP systems, their perspective was, it is supposed to be an accounting system. It didn't do manufacturing inventory. So they were thinking that ERP system is just limited to that. But if you look at today's ERP system, they are far more advanced, right? So obviously, ERP system is supposed to be your core. It's supposed to be centralized, sort of quarterback, because it is actually doing the workflow collaboration. Now, you have other systems such as your MES, if you have any sort of MES layer. Now, that is going to control the workflow at the plant level inside the MES, right? And then you have a data lake, and that data lake is going to be slightly more enterprise data lake, because that's where your business costing, financial reporting data is going to be there. So you have that as well. Now, when it comes to operational data is a very different beast overall from the data structure perspective. You don't want to bring all of those data related to either sensors or electricity inside your ERP system because it is not designed for that. If you are actually going to bloat that, it's actually going to struggle with the performance, right? So that's why you have the operational data platform. So from your experience, when you look at this architecture, what do you see when it comes to variations of the architecture in different organizations when they have, let's say, ERP plus MES plus whatever the systems they are going to have?
I think that's actually a very good point of discussion, because it is kind of important to understand where it sits, because every company we talk to, right, they have been using ERP systems, CMMS systems, MES systems for years, not decades. So now the goal of ODP is, again, the reason you are centralizing and structuring this operational data, there's a goal to it, and the goal is it's going to go through a workflow, and the workflow is going to kind of output certain performance metrics. Now, this, at least in today's, I would say, the way in which ODP is being deployed, it's mostly oriented at the operations teams, meaning
Right.
the end user, the people who end up using the output from an ODP usually they happen to be part of the operations team. Could be operator, plant manager, director of ops, VP of ops,
Yeah.
and in this case, part of the ODP is also the workflows that come with it. Meaning, let's say you don't enterprise data is vast, it's huge. You don't need to kind of centralize every single data point in the entire company. That's I wouldn't say that's the goal of ODP. More specifically, the goal is, let's say if you're an operator and you are in charge of monitoring 200 membranes, right? You use membranes to, you buy raw water, you clean it using your membranes, and then that becomes your beverage. Now, as the operations team that has to handle the 200 membranes, meaning it's your job to make sure you keep an eye on all of them. They should be performing at all times, and if one or more of those assets, if they start consuming more electricity than required, it's your job to spot it as soon as possible and then swap it out, clean it, replace it. So there are many things you need to sort of keep an eye on to make the system run smoothly. So the ODP's intent is only to enough data to enable those workflows. So for example, membrane monitoring is a workflow, so that maybe you'll need 12 to 14 data streams. That's it, right? You don't need the other 1,000 that you're gathering inside the company. And really, kind of data centralization plus workflow, that I would say that is what an ODP is about, oriented towards the operation. So I would say ODP sits as a layer above data collection, but before I would say intelligence, call it any form of data intelligence can happen. ODP facilitates that.
Right. So just to be clear, just one point of clarification there overall in that architecture. So, obviously the ODP is going to be doing the data gathering. It's doing the cleansing. As you mentioned, it's also going to be doing some sort of dashboarding. You are going to get KPI if you're running 200 membranes, as you have mentioned. If one of them is malfunctioning, you are probably going to get notification. And based on that, you are actually going to be doing something, but that action of doing something is going to be outside of the ODP system. The intent of ODP system, and again, this is my understanding, you can correct me if I'm off here. The intent of ODP system is really to provide you either the notification or the data points or the analysis, but it's up to you how you want to handle that. It's not handling the workflow piece of the process, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely spot on. So a simple example in this case is, let's say that so the data collection system, it has gathered pressure, temperature, flow rates of all the membranes, and then the ODP says membrane number 62 is malfunctioning. It needs maintenance. What happens after that is it's going to automatically create a support ticket in your support system. So basically, ODP is not going to be the support ticket system you use. You already have it. You've been using it for many years. So I would say it's very important for ODP, both on the data input side and the output side, to be API enabled, because more often than not, it ends up sitting between these systems. So it's very important that you cannot be like, hey, this ends here, and the output cannot go any further. It's just not going to work. So it's absolutely right. Once you detect that membrane number 62 needs maintenance, you create a support ticket, and that's going to send a notification to the operator, and they'll schedule it. So yeah, that's absolutely the right way to look at it.
Very interesting. So one of the parallels that we are going to draw here is going to be with historians, because if you actually look at the functionality of historians, they are really doing that, every second thing, and they are trying to do the time series analysis, right, of the whatever is happening inside the operations. So now when you compare historians with ODP, are they similar? Are they different? Do they coexist? What is going to be scope of boundaries between these two systems?
Actually, data historian serves as an input to ODP. And the reason is, let's say without ODP, what usually happens is historians, they collect a lot of raw data. And then once the data comes out, the operations team, they usually kind of have to do some kind of quick analysis, either with Tableau or Power BI or Excel, usually a combo, to understand, okay, there is this enormous quantity of raw data. I need to extract the performance metric or the signal and then feed that into the next system. It's going to do the work. Now, this can work if you have only one membrane, but when there are thousands and thousands on the field,
Yeah.
between the historian and the system that's going to do the next thing, there's a big gap that was very manual, and that's the gap ODP fills, right? So I would say historians are very complementary to ODP.
Very interesting. So the next parallel I am going to draw here is going to be with respect to MES. And I don't know, the businesses that you have worked with, they had some sort of MES, or it was without MES. But MES does a lot of what you are trying to describe from the ODP perspective. Obviously, MES are not very data driven. They are not very AI centric. They are not designed for that. They are designed for plant level workflow activities, not necessarily what you are describing. So, where does MES fit in this? So, historian is actually feeding the data to ODP. Is MES going to feed data as well, or is MES as part of the architecture? Where does MES fit?
Yeah, I think you made a very, very good point that MES sits very close to the factory floor. And what we saw more and more as we work with customers is the workflows that they have, they're kind of their virtual constructions. Meaning, let's say if you sit with the operations team at a beverage plant or within a distributed team, the work they do, part of it is obviously it touches the physical reality,
Yeah.
but a simple things like summing up the numbers from the last 36 hours, it's a human construct, right? It's something that the operations team decided this is a signal we need before we make a call. So that's where ODP really shines. Is it's basically, it looks at the work that you as the operator you would need, and you can literally construct the workflow. And really, at the end of the day, the job of workflow is to detect and predict, right? And detection is, if I throw a million data points, detect the top three interesting points. That's really kind of the job. And predict is, if I don't do anything, what's going to happen in the next 24 hours? It'll really spike up, or can I wait, right? So it's basically detection and prediction in this operator's workflow, in that console. That's where ODP really shines, and that flexibility really allows operations teams to kind of really slice and dice it. And yes, they serve a big purpose. Obviously, all of our customers use that, but it's just this work of detecting events of interest. Like, for example, let's say the operator comes into work at 9 o'clock and they have like 217 tickets waiting
Okay.
for them. And most of them are usually not, you just need to click on it. But within that, really, maybe three need their urgent, immediate attention. The other 214, they're really just mild or almost nothing. So it's things like that where ODP can really shine. Is it's meant as a support tool that can detect and predict events of interest to you, and then kind of you can allocate time on that. Because if you do a round robin method, you want to go one by one. By the time you get to the urgent items, it's already too late, right? This is how I think ODP exists, and also kind of it serves a purpose for the operations team.
Okay, very interesting. So for our listeners, obviously they are going to be slightly more business audience and they don't have as much understanding of the systems and the architecture. And the best way to help them understand what is going to be the business outcome of, let's say, if they are going to be introducing the ODP platform in their architecture, or they might be interested in understanding what it can do for their business, the best way to understand that is going to be in the form of a story. So do you want to pick a story of the engagement that you work with? So I want you to start with the as is situation of the business, the kind of challenges that they were facing, and then describe the business model, describe the architecture, and then what challenges they were facing and what all changes they made in the architecture using your platform, and what was the final outcome of that.
Yeah, I love telling stories. So one very good example is of a beverage company,
Okay.
right? And I'm gonna take the membrane example. So the earlier what I mentioned,
Yeah.
it's actually a real use case.
Yeah.
So the way in which they were working, the operations team, how they functioned was they have, they have a large number of membranes, and it's a large company. So they buy millions of gallons of water from the
Okay.
city, and they clean it. And then after cleaning, the water goes and becomes the beverage. Now, there are a couple of things to know here. One, membrane as an asset, it consumes electricity to function,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
And the more water you push through it, the blockier it gets, because that's how membranes function. They block particles, and every couple of weeks you got to clean the ones that got blocky. So that's one point to remember, because
Yeah.
if the membrane gets more blocky, you have to push harder, which means
Yeah.
your electricity bill goes up. So electricity is a key, very important thing. The second very important thing is, you buy 100 gallons, how much of that is going to be useful? Meaning, after cleaning, after accounting for wastage and inefficiencies. So, roughly, for example, you buy 100 gallons, 80 gallons comes out, and that becomes beer. So, technically, you paid for 100 gallons, but you're only using 80. So, it's to your benefit to increase that percentage. 80%, it's called like recovery rate. So, water recovery, the more it goes up, because you've already paid the money to buy the 100, you may as well be more efficient. So electricity consumption and water recovery were two very important metrics that they were working with.
Yeah.
Now, by the default status quo is just manually managing it, because there's so many membranes, there's only so much an operator can do. And sometimes when a single membrane gets blocky, it consumes 2x, 3x, 4x the amount of electricity that
Yep.
a regular membrane would. So, and the problem was, by the time they spotted something like this happening, it's like weeks or months later. So for all that time, the electricity bill just keeps going up, and
Yeah.
recovery keeps going down. So that was the current status quo. And once they deployed ODP, there are two key kind of outcomes happened. One was membranes consuming more. It happens, but now, instead of waiting weeks or months, they were able to detect it right then and there. Right, somebody comes into work and we send a notification saying that, okay, hey, membrane number 72, it's consuming 3x the amount of electricity. You got to clean it, right? So that by itself, over a period of 12 months, is led to enormous ROI in terms of electricity, because it's an extremely expensive resource. On the other hand, because they were able to spot the membrane performance, spot the blocky ones, make it better, the water recovery rate increased by so much that within a span of 12 months, they saved more than 15 million gallons of water. That's just one site. And that baseline is compared to the previous year. So we established status quo, deployed ODP, and drove these metrics. And the additional benefit to that, in addition to it's a financial ROI, it's great. On top of that, it's very important for their ESG footprint as well, like water consumption. It's a very
Yep.
important metric. Energy consumption, very important metric. So on top of the financial ROI, we're able to successfully impact their ESG footprint as well. So it's a very nice case study of how ODP can work for a beverage company, and can very easily. Membrane is just one asset. It could be pumps, filters, boilers, condensers, clarifiers. So you can replace an asset or a process with anything else, and the result or the structure looks like this. How you can drive success with beverages.
Okay, so very interesting. Obviously, I appreciate the financial outcome, but obviously, as the executive, my goal is going to be to understand what is going to be required to be able to do this. Let's say if I am interested in exploring this initiative for my organization. So obviously, ODP is not going to be a magic wand where I'm going to wave. I have got a
Right.
bunch of membranes and, it's going to magically work, right?
Right.
It doesn't work that way. By the way, when you go from manufacturing A to manufacturing B, here you have membranes, and you mentioned that, if you have boilers, it could work with everything. But do you want to describe a little bit of technological details in terms of how to go from point A to point B when you say, okay, if you have got membranes, okay, what exactly is driving the data exchange that you need to get from your membranes, right? So I don't know if they are going to, the ODP platform is going to have the PLC connectivity built as part of the platform that you can talk to any of the PLCs or sensors. So do you want to talk a little bit about the connectivity and what is going to be required to enable that communication between the hardware as well as the ODP platform.
The ODP, by design, it can connect to a number of data sources. So, for example, the most common data source, it's a data historian, right?
Okay.
And but also we have seen data lakes where companies have already collected and created a cloud data lake, and they say, hey, here's an API.
Okay.
Your ODP can connect to this, and you can start pulling data once every 5 minutes or 10 minutes or once every 30 minutes. So that's the most common way in which we have seen API, and all good modern systems, they come with some form of API. So if you're collecting data and you're using a data collection vendor to do that, it usually comes with an API that you can ask your partners to connect to it and start pulling the data. That's what we have done successfully many times, and it's a very nice way. On top of that, we usually try to connect to the API as opposed to going all the way down to PLC, because there are many good established companies that get the data from the hardware to the sensor to the gateway PLC to like a cloud data store, and that part of the equation, we were happy to do it, but it's not there are other companies that do it really well. Now, once that data is available somewhere, in some shape or form with the remote connected API, that's when ODP can pull the data periodically. And then the way I would say what we've seen work in the wild is, for a big company, you can't ask 20,000 people to simultaneously use a new technology, right? So
yeah,
what usually works is the leader, once they decide, okay, I want to give ODP a shot, I want to see how it works, they usually select a small team, maybe 5 to 10 people at a specific site. And even within that site, they choose a very specific part of their workflow to test it out. So in this case, a large beverage company, they have many different things going on, but they chose the membrane part of the site to test that, right? And what that does is it really helps you focus on the problem you need to solve. So, for example, in this case, electricity consumption was the key issue, and it's not just global electricity consumption. The problem definition was so specific and narrow that the electricity consumption by the membranes at this site, right? Okay. So it's kind of, once you narrow it down, then you can work backwards from that to understand, okay, we know what we want to solve. Now, what levers can we pull to impact it? Once we know that, then okay, after that, where is that data sitting? Like, I want to increase or decrease the pressure or the frequency of cleans. I know that's the lever, but where is the data sitting? Then you go to that data source, you connect your ODP to that data source, and you let your small team, 5 to 10 people, you let them use it for 90 days. Because any good ODP, it will prove itself in 90 days. Like, it doesn't take 2 years. It's not a 2-year project. You don't need to wait 2 years to see an ROI. So within 90 days, it's very quick, very focused, narrow template that you create. Okay, before doing this, we used to spend X on electricity. In 90 days, we are now spending Y. It creates a nice success template. Now you can take that and then move to other areas within the site. You can move to membranes at other sites. So that's how you you take that template, success template, and then you scale it out across the org.
Okay, so very interesting, and I'm still trying to follow along, and I want to make sure that my listeners are able to follow along as well. So when you typically look at Historian, you are getting the data from Historian. You are also getting data from other cloud data sources or the data sources that the companies might have. So you are gathering all of that data and bringing that to your ODP. Now, a lot of people are going to question that, what, if I'm doing all of that, I can probably build these workflows myself. Why do I need the ODP platform, right? So in this particular case, let's say if I'm the user and I am trying to use the ODP platform and I am trying to understand what my journey is going to be. So I don't know if you're able to describe the workflow of how you are going to create these models when you are, let's say, I don't know, maybe you are monitoring electricity. So what are different variables that you are going to be modeling inside your system? And then finally, which are the data points that you are going to be needing to enable those models? How much work is going to be required in creating those models inside the ODP platform?
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. And I think over time, we have iterated on this specific topic. So a good ODP comes with pre-built templates. So what I
Okay.
mean by that is if you have an ODP product, they already have templates for membrane monitoring,
Okay.
cooling towers, heating systems, boilers, condensers. So it's basically if you are a company that says, okay, I want to start with boilers, right?
Yeah.
ODP already has a workflow template that you can use, but also it's not set in stone. Meaning, out of the box, we say that, okay, here's what the workflow looks like. Here are 5 tabs. Each tab has these metrics. These are the data streams it needs. So all of that is defined, but you can drag and drop and make it your own, right? It doesn't mean like that just because ODP says, here are 9 performance metrics that you
Yeah.
need to monitor boilers. You can add a 10th. You can remove one and make it 8. You can change existing formulas within those metrics to customize it and make it your own without embarking on a new 12-month project just to change a small metric. So ODP comes with pre-built templates that are customizable by the user. So what that does really is ODP provides a starting point, right? What
Okay.
it does is out of the box, it just works, but also on top of that, you can make it your own. Now, what this really does is it provides the confidence for leaders to say that, okay, look, this is a tool that's just replicating our existing work, but it provides freedom. Meaning, without a tool like that, people still do it, right? The performance metrics or performance monitoring. Operators, they still do it. They just use Excel or Tableau or Power BI. They're still doing it. It's just manual and it's prone to error. So ODP kind of automates the simpler parts of the monitoring. And when I say simple, it's not that simple either because it has to make decisions. Like for example, collecting data, sure, that's doable, but making decisions, making calls on what's worth showing to the operator. So I
Yeah.
think ODP brings all of that to the table out of the box.
Okay. So amazing, details there. So now we are going to dig a little bit deeper into that. So, for example, let's say if you have all of these KPIs, the main value that I can see right now, and hopefully my listeners are able to follow along, is going to be the KPIs that you are looking for. That is going to be pre-built as part of the template. The only thing you have to do is you have to really map the data, and you don't have to spend as much time in creating these reports and the KPIs that you are looking for. And then on top of that, you are probably going to get some AI and machine learning as well if you require. But the real question that I'm going to have for you is going to be, especially in the hardware space, when you go from vendor one to vendor two, okay? When you talk about membrane from vendor one to vendor two, typically the kind of data they are going to provide is going to be very different. There are a lot of inconsistencies, especially in the hardware space. So, typically, do you see any challenges because of that? Is there any sort of canonical model that you guys like to prescribe, or do you expect that these businesses are already going to have the canonical model, or do you have to put some work in figuring out, okay, how are you going to talk from vendor one to vendor two?
I think in hardware, it's a very, very important point, and it's one thing that we have dealt with quite a bit. And a good ODP product kind of masks that complexity from you, which means that it is, yes, absolutely true. If you go to different vendors, they all have their own format. So I think a good ODP product should account for that. So internally, to the customer or to the leader, to the operations team, it should look like, oh, this ODP can connect to hardware from 4 different companies, and it can connect to OSI Soft and Schneider and Aspen type many other systems. So the goal is to pre-build those integrations and account for those variations so that your customer or the user, they don't have to worry about it, because you're absolutely right. Different companies have different formats, but also what's happening especially in the last 5 years, is they're kind of converging on at least the structure or the theme of how data is collected and stored, right? So for example, time series data, right?
Yeah.
It's a very common theme, and more and more vendors are kind of adhering to a standard structure where the data each data point has a timestamp, and for each timestamp there is pressure and temperature and flow rate, and they try to kind of keep it consistent. Now that's one good thing. The other good thing is time series databases
Yeah.
are being optimized just to handle this type of data. Because in the past, there's relational database, there's NoSQL, there's many different types of databases. And what happened was as time series data became more and more prevalent, right? More people started gathering this data. Time series databases became very important. And also, what they do is they standardize structure, meaning anybody who wants to build an application for time series data, they can now rely on time series databases to kind of drive performance, kind of standardize everything. And so, because of this, I think it makes it a little bit easier and nicer and better compared to like 10 years ago. But absolutely, even now, it's your job as the ODP provider to account for as many variations as possible in the data collection and storage part of it so that your customers don't have to worry about that complexity.
Okay, amazing. So that's it for today. Do you have any last minute closing thoughts or remarks for our listeners?
Absolutely. And this is, I mean, my thoughts, I think it's mostly oriented towards, as somebody, as a leader of a large business, if you are thinking about, how do you explore new technology, right? But today it's ODP, tomorrow it could be something else.
Yeah.
I think just a three-layered approach that I've seen work really well is one, find your core purpose, right? Before AI, before you use any kind of tool, the goal is kind of what do you want to do here, really at the heart of it, right? What's that in plain English? What is it that's gonna keep you excited and interested? And kind of finding that Zen spot is gonna help you keep going because I've seen a lot of people get jaded. They try something for like 2 weeks and they're like, oh, this new interesting tool didn't work. The reason it happens is there was no underlying theme or motive or purpose driving that. So I would say step one, it applies to career, life, anywhere. Right? Just find your core purpose and finding that Zen spot. It matters a lot. The second one is find your people. And when I say people, I mean in a large company, not everybody will have the same exact viewpoint. Some people are risk averse, some people are risk seeking, most people are in the middle. So when you're trying something new, it's important to find your people who will legit, honestly give something a shot, right? And what happens is if you surround yourself with good people, it will always kind of they'll pull you forward. Their good practices will rub off on you, and it just helps everyone. It's uplifting. So I think finding your people, second one, and the third is your time. Right, time is obviously, as you know, it's a very precious resource, and deploying it wisely is a very high ROI activity. So I would say if spend your time on something that you're really really good at. For everything else, get experts, like get other people. Like you don't need to do every single thing. I see many companies trying to, they've sold like a beverage product or a food product for 100 years, and suddenly now they want to build cloud-based AI software. It's just, I mean, you can do it. It's just it'll be a very low ROI activity, right? You don't. There are many companies who do this. So I would say if you're really good at something, deploy your time there because the ROI is super high. For everything else, just kind of get expertise, get experts because it'll be 10x less expensive, 10x more productive. It's a very good ROI. So I would say, yeah, find your core purpose, find your people, deploy your time wisely. I think it just, I've been, it's something that I've been following for a long time and it seems to be working well.
Right, amazing. And my personal takeaway from this conversation is going to be there's so much happening in the industry 4.0. There are so many different technologies. So make sure you are at least evaluating them. You are understanding their abilities and what technologies such as ODP can do for your business. On that note, Prateek, I really want to thank you for your time. This has been a powerful conversation.
Sam, thank you for having me. It was a really wonderful conversation.
Of course. I cannot thank our guests enough for coming on the show, for sharing their knowledge and journey. I always pick up learnings from our guests, and hopefully, you learned something new today. If you want to learn more about Prateek, head over to prateekj.com. It's prateekj.com. If you want to learn more about operational data platform, head over to plutoshift.com. It's PLUTOSHIFT.com. Links and more information will also be available in the show notes. If anything in this podcast resonated with you and your business, you might want to check other related episodes, including the interview with Jim Gavigan, who shares his insights on the importance of time series data and why it is important to understand your capacity. Also, the interview with Ira Sharp, who shares his insights on open automation and why that is important for manufacturers to understand as they increase the Industry 4.0 maturity of their companies. Also, don't forget to subscribe and spread the word among folks with similar backgrounds. If you have any questions or comments about the show, please review and rate us on your favorite podcasting platform or DM me on any social channels. I'll try my best to respond personally and make sure you get help. Thank you, and I hope to catch you on the next episode of the WBS.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.